Have you ever loved someone so deeply that your empathy became their comfort until one day your silence became their punishment? Let that breathe, because that's the moment a super empath discovers their true power, not in giving more, but in walking away without anger, without drama, just peace. You see, a super empath doesn't love halfway. They feel everything, your tone, your energy, your hesitation. They forgive when they shouldn't. They explain when silence would have been wiser, and they hope when others would have already left. But here's the thing no one tells you. When a super empath detaches, it's not coldness, it's clarity. Because detachment doesn't mean they stopped caring. It means they finally started caring about themselves more than your potential. And that moment, that quiet, graceful exit, becomes a mirror the other person can't escape. Because suddenly they're left alone with the one person they've been avoiding the whole time, themselves. The empath doesn't need revenge. Their peace is loud enough. Their absence becomes the echo of everything you took for granted. And the beauty? They don't do it to hurt you. They do it because they finally realized they were never the problem. So if you're that super empath listening right now, the one who keeps asking, why do I always end up the healer, the fixer, the one who feels too much? Remember this, your love was never too much. It was just given to someone who was too empty to receive it. Your detachment isn't weakness, it's your evolution. Because sometimes the greatest act of love is choosing peace over potential. Empathy is one of the rarest emotional gifts a person can have. It's the ability to not only understand what someone else feels, but to actually feel it with them. A super empath doesn't just hear your words. They read your energy, sense your discomfort, and notice the things you don't say out loud. They know when you're hurting, even when you insist you're fine. But while empathy is beautiful, it can also become exhausting when it's given without boundaries. Because the same sensitivity that helps a super empath connect deeply can also make them vulnerable to emotional drain, manipulation, and disappointment. Empathy becomes dangerous when it turns into emotional absorption, when you start feeling responsible for fixing everyone else's pain. You start to mistake compassion for obligation. You believe that being kind means tolerating disrespect. You tell yourself, they're just going through something, or they didn't mean it like that, until you're carrying the emotional weight of two people. And that's when empathy stops being a gift and starts becoming a burden. The truth is, not everyone deserves access to your emotional depth. Some people don't want to heal. They just want your energy to make their chaos feel less lonely. They will take your understanding as permission to avoid accountability. They'll rely on your compassion as a cushion for their patterns. That's why an empath without boundaries becomes an endless well that never fills up. You give and give thinking it's love, when really it's self-abandonment disguised as generosity. Real empathy has wisdom in it. It understands that you can hold space for someone's pain without making it your own. You can care without carrying. You can love without losing yourself. Boundaries don't make you less kind. They make your kindness sustainable. When you say, I understand what you're feeling, but I can't let that energy consume me, you're not being selfish. You're being emotionally intelligent. That's the balance a super empath has to learn. Empathy with boundaries means you stop apologizing for having limits. You stop explaining why you're protecting your peace. You realize that saying no isn't cold. It's courageous. Because when you keep absorbing other people's emotions, you eventually forget which feelings belong to you. And when you're drained, you can't show up for anyone, not even yourself. So you start to practice selective empathy. You give your compassion to people who value it, not those who exploit it. You understand that not everyone deserves a front row seat to your heart. There's a quiet power in an empath who finally understands that love without boundaries isn't love. It's survival mode. You begin to see that your role isn't to heal everyone, it's to stay whole. You learn that you can walk beside someone in pain without carrying them. And in doing so, you transform your empathy from a source of exhaustion into a source of strength. You're no longer drained by the world. You're grounded in it. Because empathy isn't weakness when it's guided by self-respect. It becomes your superpower, one that connects you deeply but never costs you your peace. Detachment often gets misunderstood. People hear the word and imagine coldness, distance, or indifference. But true detachment, especially for a super empath, is none of those things. It isn't about building walls to shut people out. It's about building enough inner strength to not let someone else's chaos pull you under. It's the quiet shift from emotional dependence to emotional self-respect. Detachment means you finally realize that your peace is too sacred to be constantly disrupted by someone who doesn't value it. It's the art of being present without being consumed, of caring deeply without losing yourself in someone else's storm. When you start detaching, you're not withdrawing love. You're redefining it. You're saying, I can love you, but I won't lose myself trying to keep you comfortable. You stop over-explaining your worth. You stop chasing for clarity from people who communicate through confusion. You stop trying to decode mixed signals because you finally understand that peace doesn't come from fixing what's unclear. It comes from stepping back from it. This is where detachment becomes the purest form of emotional maturity. It's not about pretending you don't feel. It's about choosing not to suffer unnecessarily. For the empath who spent years trying to save everyone, detachment can feel unnatural at first. It can feel like you're being heartless. But what's really happening is that your heart is finally learning balance. You realize that you can't pour endlessly into people who only show up when they're empty. You begin to see that protecting your peace is not a betrayal of love. It's the preservation of it. Because when you detach from drama, manipulation, and inconsistency, you're not abandoning others, you're honoring yourself. You're saying, I deserve the same care I've been giving away so freely. Detachment isn't silent resentment, it's silent power. It's the moment you stop reacting to every emotional tug. You stop feeling the need to prove your loyalty, to fix misunderstandings that someone else is comfortable letting linger. You start responding with calm instead of urgency. You don't chase closure anymore because you understand that peace is closure. And suddenly, the person who once controlled your emotions through unpredictability no longer has that power. Your calmness confuses them. Your silence unnerves them. Your stability exposes their instability. When a super empath detaches, it shifts the dynamic completely. The other person starts to feel what you used to feel. The uncertainty, the longing, the absence of warmth. Your withdrawal becomes a mirror, forcing them to face the emotional emptiness they used to hide behind your compassion. But for you, detachment isn't revenge. It's relief. You're not trying to make them feel what you felt. You're simply refusing to feel it anymore. You're reclaiming your energy and reminding yourself that love without peace is just pain dressed as devotion. Detachment, in its purest form, is love with boundaries. It's choosing yourself without apology. It's standing in your truth without needing anyone to understand it. It's realizing that sometimes walking away quietly is the most powerful thing you can do. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you finally care enough about yourself to stop suffering in the name of love. Silence is often mistaken for weakness, but in truth, it's one of the most powerful languages an empath can speak. When a super empath stops explaining, stops defending, stops trying to make someone understand their heart, that silence carries a weight that words could never match. It's not avoidance, it's evolution. Because there comes a point when you realize that no amount of explanation can make someone see you clearly if they've already decided to misunderstand you. Silence becomes your boundary. It's the line between protecting your peace and performing for validation. For the empath who's used to over-communicating, silence can feel foreign, even painful at first. You're used to fixing every miscommunication, softening every conflict, ensuring no one ever feels misunderstood. But eventually, you learn that some people rely on that effort as control. They use your need for harmony to keep you engaged in cycles of confusion. They know that as long as you're explaining, you're still emotionally invested. So when you pull your energy back and stop feeding the drama, the silence starts to echo. It becomes louder than any argument could. Silence, in this sense, isn't about pride. It's about self-respect. You're no longer explaining your worth to someone who's already shown they can't see it. You're no longer chasing closure from people who create chaos just to feel significant. You start to understand that peace doesn't come from being heard by others. It comes from hearing yourself. You stop talking to be understood and start listening to be aligned. And that shift changes everything. When you choose silence, you reclaim your power. You realize you don't need to win the argument to find peace. You don't need to correct someone's version of you. Let them think what they want. Your calm is your clarity. Your stillness is your statement, because in silence there is strength, the kind that doesn't need an audience to feel valid. It's the energy of someone who has learned to respond only where it matters and to disengage where it doesn't. The beauty of silence is that it reveals truth. When you stop explaining, people's true intentions surface. Those who valued you will come closer. Those who only wanted control will fade away. Silence creates space, and space shows you who's real. It separates those who are connected to your heart from those who are only connected to your availability. That's when you realize silence isn't empty. It's full of answers. There's a quiet confidence in the empath who finally learns not to react. They understand that peace doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. They let their actions speak, their absence resonate, their calm unsettle those who once thrived on emotional chaos. And in that stillness, they find themselves again. Because silence doesn't mean you've given up. It means you've grown up. It means you've stopped fighting to be understood and started choosing to be free. And sometimes the loudest message you can ever send is the sound of nothing at all. When a super empath finally pulls back, something powerful happens. Their absence becomes a reflection that the other person cannot escape. It's as if all the energy, reassurance, and emotional warmth that once covered someone's insecurities suddenly disappears. And what's left behind is a mirror, one that shows them exactly who they are without the empath's light to soften their edges. The empath's detachment creates silence, but within that silence is truth. The person who once depended on their validation starts to feel the emptiness that was always there, only now there's no one left to fill it for them. For so long, the empath's presence acted as a shield. They soothed the rough edges, made excuses, translated coldness into confusion instead of rejection. They filled the emotional gaps with compassion, believing that love could change what someone refused to acknowledge. But once they step away, there's nothing left to hide behind. The mirror turns and the other person is forced to see the reflection of their own actions, not through words, not through confrontation, but through the quiet reality of what's missing. It's the loss of consistency that reveals the truth. This mirror effect is not born from vengeance. The empath doesn't detach to teach a lesson. They detach to save themselves. But ironically, that very act becomes the most honest lesson of all. The other person begins to feel the weight of everything they dismissed, the late replies, the emotional distance, the way they took comfort for granted. When the empath no longer reaches out, no longer overextends, no longer fills the silence, the void becomes unbearable. It's in that void that realization starts to surface. The empath's absence isn't about punishment. It's about energy alignment. They're no longer matching the frequency of someone who drains them. They're reclaiming the space that was once filled with overthinking, with trying to fix what was never their job to fix. The mirror is powerful because it doesn't argue. It doesn't beg. It simply reflects. It holds truth without emotion, showing the consequences of imbalance. The empath doesn't have to say, "You hurt me." Their silence says it. Their peace says it louder. And for the one left behind, that mirror becomes uncomfortable. It shows them how much of the connection relied on the empath's effort. It reveals that love cannot survive on one person's willingness to keep the flame alive. It exposes the difference between genuine connection and emotional dependency. And the realization can be haunting because they see, maybe for the first time, that the love they lost wasn't just affection. It was emotional safety, understanding, and presence. For the empath, this shift is freedom. They're no longer the emotional caretaker. They're no longer responsible for someone else's growth. Their absence speaks the truth. Their presence, once softened, the mirror they've left behind, becomes an invitation for the other person to evolve, or a reminder of what happens when you take an empath's love for granted. Either way, the reflection remains. The empath walks forward lighter, while the other is left to face the one person they've been running from all along, themselves. Peace is often misunderstood as passivity, but for a super empath, peace is the ultimate expression of strength. It's not the absence of emotion, it's the mastery of it. There comes a point when you've cried enough, explained enough, and tried hard enough to be understood. You reach a quiet turning point, not out of exhaustion, but out of clarity. You realize that chaos doesn't deserve your attention and drama doesn't deserve your energy. That realization becomes your power move. Peace, then, isn't something you find, it's something you choose. And it's a choice that requires tremendous courage. The empath who once fought to be heard starts to value silence over explanation. They stop proving their love and start protecting their energy. Where once they reacted to every emotional trigger, now they pause. They breathe. They let things be. It's not indifference, it's intention. It's choosing to respond with calm instead of being pulled into someone else's emotional storm. That calmness is not weakness. It's control. It's the moment you stop letting people rent space in your mind that they haven't earned. Peace doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally understand what's worth caring about. The empath who embraces peace stops confusing intensity with connection. They stop mistaking inconsistency for mystery. They no longer crave the highs and lows that used to feel like passion because they've learned that real love is steady, not chaotic. And when they walk away, they do it quietly. No grand speeches, no need for revenge. Their peace speaks louder than any confrontation could. There's something deeply unsettling to those who once thrived on an empath's emotional reactions. They can't manipulate calm. They can't argue with silence. They can't regain control when you stop feeding the dynamic. When you choose peace, you break the cycle that once kept you entangled. You stop being predictable. You stop being accessible to the same patterns that drained you. Your stillness becomes a statement. I no longer need to fight for what should flow naturally. The power in peace lies in its softness. It's gentle but unshakable. It doesn't demand closure because it already has it. It doesn't seek validation because it's found it within. And for the super empath, this is the ultimate transformation, the shift from external approval to internal certainty. You begin to realize that you don't need to prove your worth by enduring pain. You don't need to hold space for those who continuously empty you. Peace becomes your filter, and anything that disturbs it simply doesn't belong in your life. In choosing peace, the empath finally understands that walking away is not losing. It's letting go of what was already lost. It's realizing that you can love someone deeply and still decide they don't belong in your future. Peace isn't running away from emotion. It's stepping into self-trust. It's knowing that your calm is your power, your silence is your closure, and your peace, your quiet, steady peace, is the loudest declaration of self-worth you will ever make. When a super empath finally learns the art of detachment, silence, and peace, they become something extraordinary, untouchable, not because they've stopped feeling, but because they've learned how to protect what they feel. The journey from overgiving to self-respect is not an easy one. It's a path filled with heartbreak, realization, and rebirth. But it's in that transformation that the empath discovers their real power, not in how much they give to others, but in how deeply they honor themselves. You see, the beauty of this journey is that it doesn't end in bitterness. It ends in clarity. The super empath doesn't close their heart, they refine it. They still love, they still care, but now they do it consciously. They've learned that love without peace is a prison, and peace without love is freedom misunderstood. So they choose balance, love that feels safe, compassion that has boundaries, kindness that doesn't cost them their peace. And to anyone who has ever been told they feel too much, care too much, or love too deeply, remember this: your depth is not the problem. The world needs people who can feel, who can connect, who can see beneath the surface, but never again at the expense of your sanity, never again at the cost of your worth. Because your energy is sacred, your heart is powerful, and your peace is priceless. The day you realize that peace is louder than any argument, that silence speaks louder than any justification, and that your detachment is the mirror others can't escape, that's the day you become free. You stop chasing, you stop explaining, and you simply be. Calm, steady, and certain of who you are. That is the true power of the super empath, not in their empathy alone, but in their evolution. So tonight, as you walk away from whatever has drained you, hold your head high. You didn't lose anything by choosing yourself. You simply stopped pouring your light into hands that couldn't hold it. And in doing so, you reclaimed your most precious possession, your peace. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for allowing these words to meet you where you are. May you continue to love with depth, feel with strength, and protect your peace like it's the most beautiful part of who you are, because it is. Thank you. And remember, your calm is your power, your silence is your boundary, and your peace is your victory.